I believed my graduation would be the one moment my family felt proud. Instead, one sentence into a microphone turned me into a punchline. What truly woke me up wasn't the laughter, but my mother's satisfied smile when my brother toasted to the family black sheep. Right then, I decided to finally quit the role they had forced me to play for 24 years. My name is Rose Hansen, and for 24 years, I have been waiting for the moment when my existence would stop feeling like an inconvenience to the people who created me. Today was supposed to be that day. I stood on the manicured lawn of my parents' house in Cedar Ridge, clutching a plastic cup of lukewarm punch, wearing a dress I had bought from a discount rack 3 seasons ago. The air was thick with the humidity typical of mid-June, smelling of charcoal smoke and the overly sweet perfume my Aunt Brenda always bathed in. Around me, 50 or so people, neighbors, distant cousins, and friends of my parents, mingled and ate potato salad off flimsy paper plates. They were technically here for me. The banner strung between the 2 oak trees sagged a little in the middle, spelling out "Congratulations" in generic, store-bought letters. I had graduated 2 days ago with a degree in business administration, a piece of paper that represented 4 years of sleepless nights, double shifts at a 24-hour diner, and student loans that I had signed for with a trembling hand because my parents claimed they were too leveraged to co-sign. I had done it alone, every textbook, every semester fee, every late-night panic attack about rent had been mine to manage. I thought that kind of grit was something to be celebrated. I thought that today, the invisible barrier between me and my family might finally dissolve. I was wrong. The center of attention was not the graduate. It was, as always, my brother. Ethan Hansen was 32 years old, 8 years my senior, and he moved through the crowd with the unearned confidence of a man who has never truly faced the consequences of his own mediocrity. He was wearing a linen suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, holding a beer in one hand and gesturing wildly with the other as he recounted a story about his latest business venture. Ethan was a serial entrepreneur, which was a polite way of saying he was perpetually unemployed and constantly begging for investment capital for ideas that fell apart within 6 months. I watched him from the edge of the patio. He was charming. I had to give him that. He had the kind of smile that made you want to believe him, even when you knew he was lying. He was currently holding court with Mr. Henderson, our next-door neighbor, talking loudly about cryptocurrency markets and high-yield returns. I knew for a fact that Ethan had borrowed $2,000 from Mom just last week to fix his car because he couldn't make rent. But here, under the afternoon sun, he was the tycoon, and I was just the scenery. "Rose, honey, you look tired," my mother said, appearing at my elbow. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were scanning the crowd, checking to make sure everyone had enough ice. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, forcing my posture to straighten. "Just a long week." "Well, try to smile more. It's a party," she said, adjusting a napkin holder on the table next to us. "People will think you're ungrateful if you stand around looking like a thundercloud. Look at your brother. He's the life of the party." I bit the inside of my cheek. "Ethan isn't the one who just graduated. Mom." She finally looked at me, her expression tightening just a fraction. "Everything has to be a competition with you, doesn't it? Can't you just let everyone have a good time without making it about who did what?" I opened my mouth to argue, to remind her that this party was literally explicitly about what I had done, but I closed it again. It was an old dance, one we had been performing since I was a child. In the Hansen household, Ethan was the dreamer, the golden boy whose failures were just stepping stones to greatness. I was the pragmatist, the one who kept her head down, the one who was boringly responsible. And in their eyes, being responsible was synonymous with being judgmental. I was the buzzkill because I asked questions like, "How will you pay that back?" Or, "Is that actually legal?" I drifted away from her, seeking refuge near the drink cooler. I just needed to get through the next 2 hours. Then I could go back to my tiny apartment on the other side of town, take off these heels, and breathe. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine of feedback cut through the chatter. The music cut out. I turned to see Ethan standing on the raised wooden deck, holding a microphone that was connected to a karaoke machine someone had dragged out of the garage. He tapped the mic head, the thumping sound echoing across the yard. "Attention, everyone! Attention!" Ethan boomed. His face was flushed, likely from the 4 beers I had seen him consume in the last hour. If I could have everyone's eyes up here for a second. The crowd quieted down. My father, who had been manning the grill, wiped his hands on his apron and looked up. Mom beamed from the center of the lawn, clapping her hands together silently as if anticipating a grand performance. My stomach twisted. I hated speeches. I hated being looked at, but I stepped forward, pasting a polite smile on my face, expecting the usual platitudes. He would say congrats. He would say good luck. And then he would probably make a joke about how I could finally start paying for dinner. Ethan swayed slightly, gripping the microphone stand. "So, we are all here to celebrate my little sister. Rose," he began. "Rose, wave to everybody." I gave a small, awkward wave. A few neighbors clapped politely. "You know," Ethan continued, his voice dropping into a tone that sounded mock serious. "It's a big day, a college degree, very fancy. I remember when well, never mind. This is about Rose." He chuckled, and a few people chuckled with him. "But seriously, folks, we all know Rose has always been unique. She's always been the one marching to the beat of a very different, very quiet drum." I felt the heat rising in my neck. Where was he going with this? "I mean, look at us." Ethan gestured broadly at the family, then at himself. "We are loud. We love life. We take risks. And then there is Rose." He paused for effect. "Rose, who worries about the price of milk. Rose, who spent 4 years reading books while the rest of the world was actually living." The smile on my face felt like it was made of dried clay. It was starting to crack. This wasn't a graduation speech. It was a roast. But I couldn't look away. I saw my mother in the front row, looking up at him with adoration. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked entertained. Ethan raised his plastic cup high in the air. "But hey, every family needs balance, right? Not everyone can be the star. Someone has to be the ground we walk on." The silence in the yard was heavy, awkward. A few people shifted their weight. Mr. Henderson looked down at his shoes. But Ethan didn't notice, or he didn't care. He was on a roll. He was the main character, and this was his monologue. "So," Ethan shouted, his voice booming with a sudden, aggressive cheerfulness, "let's raise a glass. Come on, get them up." The guests hesitantly raised their cups. "Let's toast to Rose," Ethan yelled, grinning down at me with eyes that held zero warmth. "Let's toast to the family black sheep. She finally graduated. Folks, it took a while, and she did it the hard way because she is too stubborn to ask for help. But she made it." "To the family black sheep," he repeated, laughing at his own wit. Time seemed to slow down. The phrase hung in the sticky afternoon air. The family black sheep. It wasn't just a teasing nickname. It was a verdict. It was an announcement to every neighbor, every relative, and every friend that I was the outlier, that my independence wasn't a strength, but a defect, that my refusal to enable their chaotic financial habits made me the villain. I looked around, waiting for someone to object. I waited for my father to tell him to sit down. I waited for my aunt to shake her head. Instead, I heard a laugh. It started as a giggle and then erupted into a full cackle. It was my mother. She was laughing. She was leaning against my aunt, wiping a tear from her eye, convulsing with mirth. "Oh, Ethan," she gasped out loud enough for everyone to hear, "you are terrible." Following her lead, the tension in the yard broke. Since the hostess was laughing, the guests decided it was safe to laugh too. A ripple of chuckles went through the crowd. They weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at the caricature Ethan had just painted. They were laughing at the girl who took everything too seriously, the black sheep who couldn't take a joke. I stood there, frozen. My hand was still clutching my cup so hard the plastic was beginning to buckle. I could feel the blood draining from my face. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not with adrenaline, but with a heavy, dull thud of absolute betrayal. My eyes locked with Ethan's. He wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was high-fiving a cousin, basking in the glow of his successful joke. Then I looked at my mother. She caught my eye, and for a second, I thought she might see the devastation on my face. I thought she might realize that her son had just publicly humiliated her daughter at the one event meant to honor her. But she didn't stop laughing. She just waved a dismissive hand at me. "Oh, Rose, relax," she called out, her voice carrying over the subsiding laughter. "It's just a joke. Siblings tease. Don't be so sensitive all the time. God, smile, will you?" "Yeah, Rose, lighten up," Ethan chimed in from the deck, pointing a finger at me. "Don't be such a buzzkill on your own big day." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't a scream or a sob. It was the quiet sound of a tether finally breaking. For years, I had held on to the rope that bound me to this family, pulling with all my might, trying to drag us all towards some semblance of normalcy and mutual respect. I had loaned them money I didn't have. I had listened to their complaints. I had played the role of the steady, boring, reliable daughter so that they could play the roles of the eccentric, misunderstood geniuses. I realized then, watching my mother wipe tears of laughter from her face, while I stood there feeling like my skin had been peeled off, that they didn't want me to be successful. They didn't want me to be happy. They wanted me to be the audience. They wanted me to be the prop that made them feel better about themselves. If I was the black sheep, the difficult one, the uptight one, then they got to be the fun ones. My humiliation was the currency they used to buy their own self-esteem. The shame that had been burning my cheeks suddenly cooled. It crystallized into something hard and sharp in the center of my chest. I forced the corners of my mouth up. It was a mechanical movement, pulling the muscles of my face into a shape that resembled a smile. It was the smile of a flight attendant during turbulence, the smile of a politician losing an election. "Cheers," I whispered, though no one heard me. I lifted my cup to my lips and took a sip of the warm, watery punch. It tasted bitter. I looked at Ethan, who was now descending the stairs, looking triumphant. I looked at my mother, who was already turning away to gossip with a neighbor, secure in the belief that she had managed the situation perfectly. They thought this was just another Sunday. They thought Rose would go home, cry into her pillow for an hour, and then come back next week to fix their computer, or lend Ethan rent money, or listen to Mom complain about Dad. They thought the black sheep would keep coming back to the flock, simply because she had nowhere else to go. They were wrong. The party continued for another 2 hours. I stayed. I circulated. I accepted lukewarm congratulations from people who looked at me with pity in their eyes. I played my part perfectly. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't throw my drink in Ethan's face, though the urge was so strong my hands shook. I didn't scream at my mother. I simply observed. I watched them with the detached clarity of a scientist studying a particularly aggressive species of bacteria. I catalogued every laugh, every dismissive comment, every time Ethan patted me on the head like a dog. I stored it all away. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard that made the congratulations banner look even more pathetic, I said my goodbyes. "Leaving so early?" Mom asked, handing me a container of leftover potato salad I didn't want. Ethan was going to open some champagne later. "I have work tomorrow." I lied. I didn't have work. I had taken 3 days off to celebrate. "Always working," she sighed, shaking her head. "Well, go on then. Don't be a stranger." "I won't," I said. I walked to my beat-up sedan parked on the street. I got in, locked the door, and sat in the silence for a long time. I looked back at the house. I could see the silhouette of Ethan in the window, gesturing, probably telling another story about how great he was. I started the engine. As I drove away from Cedar Ridge, I didn't cry. I felt lighter than I had in years. The black sheep was leaving the pasture, and the wolves had no idea that they had just lost their easiest meal. 3 days had passed since the graduation party, and I had spent them in a state of suspended animation. I went to work, I came home, I fed my cat, and I slept. But beneath the surface of my mundane routine, a massive tectonic shift was occurring. I was no longer the Rose who walked on eggshells. I was the Rose who was building a fortress. On Tuesday evening, I sat at the small, wobbly kitchen table in my one-bedroom apartment. The air conditioner hummed a rhythmic, rattling tune, battling the heat that radiated off the pavement outside. On the table, I had laid out my life in paper, bank statements from the last 3 years, credit card bills, and a printed spreadsheet of every transaction I had made since my 21st birthday. It was an autopsy of my own foolishness. I took a sip of cold water and picked up a highlighter. I began to mark every expense that wasn't mine. There was the $300 I sent Ethan when his car broke down in February. There was the $500 for his emergency rent payment in March. There was the recurring monthly transfer of $200 for the shared loan we had taken out 2 years ago to help him launch a drop-shipping business that never actually shipped a single product. I traced the numbers with the tip of the pen. They looked innocent enough individually. A few hundred here, $50 there for groceries he promised to pay back. The internet bill I covered because he claimed the provider had messed up his auto-pay. But when I added them up, the total made my stomach turn. Over the last 3 years, I had given my brother nearly $12,000. $12,000. That was a down payment on a reliable car. It was the start of a retirement fund. It was a safety net that would have allowed me to sleep at night without staring at the ceiling, wondering if I could afford a dental emergency. Instead, that wealth had been funneled into the black hole of Ethan's incompetence, and my return on investment was being called a black sheep over a microphone in front of 50 people. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. It was not anger. Anger is hot and messy and makes you do stupid things. This was accounting. This was strictly business. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the back of my debit card. I put it on speaker and set it on the table, listening to the generic jazz hold music while I stared at the total on my notepad. "Thank you for calling First National. This is Sarah. How can I help you?" "Hi, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "My name is Rose Hansen. I need to discuss a joint personal loan under my name and Ethan Hansen." We went through the security questions: mother's maiden name, first pet, high school mascot, routine answers to access a mess that was anything but routine. "I see the account here," Sarah said. "The balance is $4,500. The next payment is due on the 15th. I want to freeze the account for any future withdrawals or credit line increases," I said. "And I want to remove my name from the authorization for any overdraft protection linked to my personal checking account." There was a pause on the line. "Okay, I can certainly decouple the overdraft protection immediately. For the loan itself, since it is a joint liability, you cannot remove your name from the debt that already exists, but we can put a hold on any further draws if it is a revolving line of credit, which it appears to be." "Do it," I said. "Lock it down. No more money goes out, and I'm stopping the automatic transfer from my account to cover the monthly minimums. If the payment is missed, you will need to contact the primary borrower, Ethan Hansen. If the payment is missed, it will affect the credit score of both parties," Sarah warned gently. "I am aware of the risks," I replied. "I had an 800 credit score. I could take a hit. Ethan, who hovered somewhere in the 500s, could not. Please proceed." "All done," Sarah said after a moment of typing. "Is there anything else?" "Yes, I have a standing transfer of $250 scheduled for the first of every month to an external account ending in 4492. Cancel it, permanently." "Cancelled. You will receive a confirmation email shortly." "Thank you, Sarah." I hung up. The silence in the kitchen felt different now. It was heavier, but also cleaner. I had just severed the 2 main arteries that fed Ethan's lifestyle. The loan was his business capital, and the monthly transfer was his sister tax. Both were gone. I closed my laptop. I did not have to wait long for the reaction. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up. It vibrated against the wooden table with a harsh buzzing sound. The screen displayed the name Ethan, along with a picture of him giving a thumbs up. a photo I had taken years ago when I still thought his antics were charming. I watched it ring. I did not reach for it. I took a bite of an apple and chewed slowly. The ringing stopped. Then it started again immediately. He called 4 times in a row. Then came the text messages. Rose, did you touch the bank account? Card declined at the gas station. What is going on? Pick up the phone. This isn't funny. Rose, I am standing at the pump like an idiot. Fix this. I read the messages on the lock screen without opening them. His panic was palpable. For the first time in his life, the invisible magic money fairy had stopped visiting. He was experiencing a reality where actions had consequences. And apparently, that reality was taking place at a gas station. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb and went to take a shower. I washed the cheap hairspray from the workday out of my hair, scrubbing my scalp until it tingled. When I stepped out and wrapped a towel around myself, I saw that I had 7 missed calls from Ethan and 2 from my mother. I sighed. I knew I couldn't ignore her. Not yet. Ignoring Ethan was a tactical move. Ignoring Mom was a declaration of war. I needed to state my terms before I retreated. I waited for her to call a 3rd time. It took less than 5 minutes. Hello, I answered, keeping my voice flat. Rose! My mother's voice was high and breathless. The tone she used when she wanted to create a sense of emergency. What on earth is happening? Ethan just called me in a panic. He says his card isn't working and you cut him off. He is stranded. He isn't stranded, Mom, I said, walking into the bedroom and sitting on the edge of the bed. He has a cell phone and I assume he has legs. He can call a friend or he can walk. Don't be smart with me, she snapped. He says you froze the joint account. He needed that money for supplies for his new project. How could you do that without telling him? I did tell him, I said calmly. I told him 3 days ago. What? When? When he stood on a stage and told everyone that I was the disappointment of the family, I said. When he called me a black sheep and you laughed, that was the notification. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears in her head grinding, trying to find a way to pivot the conversation back to her preferred narrative. Oh, for heaven's sake, Rose, she said, her voice dropping into that dismissive, patronizing register I hated so much. Are we still on that? It was a joke, a toast. You are holding a grudge over a few words and punishing your brother financially? That is incredibly petty. It costs money to support a black sheep, I said. If I am the failure of the family, surely I cannot afford to subsidize the golden boy. I am just living up to the title you gave me. I am focusing on myself. Isn't that what selfish people do? You are twisting everything, she argued. We are family. Family helps each other. Ethan is going through a hard time. He is trying to get this business off the ground so he can support his wife. You are single. You have a steady job. You have extra. Why are you being so greedy? I don't have extra. Mom, I have debt because of him, I said, my grip on the phone tightening. And I am not punishing him. I am just stopping the enabling. I called the bank and removed my support. That is it. He is a 32-year-old man. If he wants gas money, he can get a job. He has a job! He is an entrepreneur, she yelled. He is unemployed with a hobby that costs me $400 a month, I corrected her. And I am done. The bank is closed. You are destroying this family, she said, her voice trembling with weaponized emotion. Over a stupid speech. You are willing to ruin your brother's credit and humiliate him just because your feelings got hurt? You need to grow up. Rose, you need to learn to take a joke and stop being so sensitive. Now, I want you to call the bank back right now and unlock that card. No, I said. The word hung in the air. It was small, but it felt heavy as a boulder. I had never said no to her like this. I had evaded. I had made excuses. But I had never flatly refused a direct command. Excuse me? She whispered. No, I repeated. I am not unlocking it. I am not sending him any more transfers. And I suggest you don't lend him the money either, because he isn't going to pay you back. I cannot believe you, she spat. After everything we have done for you, We raised you, we fed you, and this is how you repay us? By cutting your brother off at the knees? I am repaying you exactly what you think I am worth, I said. Nothing. Rose, if you hang up this phone without fixing this, don't bother coming to Sunday dinner, she threatened. It was her trump card. Exclusion. The threat of exile. Okay, I said. I won't. What? She sounded genuinely confused now. I said okay. I won't come to dinner. I'll save the gas money. I didn't wait for her response. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button. The call ended. I sat there in the quiet of my bedroom, staring at the wall. My heart was racing, thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were shaking slightly. It was terrifying. The guilt was already trying to creep in. That conditioned reflex that told me I was bad. I was wrong. I was hurting people. But then I thought about Ethan's face at the party. I thought about the way he grinned as he called me a black sheep. I thought about my mother's laughter, loud and cruel, echoing across the lawn. I took a deep breath. The air in my apartment felt cool and still. I was alone, yes, but for the first time in my life, my bank account was mine, my time was mine, my dignity was mine. I looked at the phone. Ethan had sent another text. Mom says you are being a bitch. You are going to regret this. I deleted the thread without replying. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and poured myself a glass of white wine. I wasn't a big drinker, but tonight felt like an occasion. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights flickering on in the dusk. I raised my glass to my reflection in the dark glass. To the black sheep, I whispered. This time, the toast didn't hurt. It felt like a promise. Saturday morning brought a revelation that hit harder than the hangover from the graduation party ever could have. After freezing the joint loan and cutting off the allowance, I decided to do a forensic deep dive into my primary checking account. I wanted to make sure there were no other leaks, no other small subscriptions to Netflix or Spotify that I had forgotten I was paying for him. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by printed statements. I was looking for small charges. Instead, I found a boulder. For the past 14 months, a transaction labeled Holloway Management had been deducting $1,250 from my account on the first of every month. I stared at the paper. My brain did a frantic, stumbling dance, trying to justify it. I remembered signing a guarantor form when Ethan and his wife, Clara, moved into their duplex 2 years ago. The landlord had required a co-signer because Ethan's credit score was abysmal. I remembered agreeing to cover the first month and the security deposit as a graduation gift to myself, a way to get them out of my parents' basement so I wouldn't have to hear them fighting when I visited. But I had never authorized a recurring payment. I logged into the online portal for the property management company using the credentials I had set up back then. There it was, in black and white. The auto-pay box was checked. The source was my checking account. I did the math in my head. $1,250 times $17,500. The air left my lungs. That was my down payment for a house. That was the master's degree I wanted to pursue. That was my life, dissolved into the ether to pay for a roof over the head of a man who called me a black sheep for sport. I had been working double shifts, eating instant ramen, and wearing shoes with holes in the soles, thinking I was just bad at saving money. I wasn't bad at saving. I was just unknowingly financing a second household. I didn't call the bank this time. This required a physical presence. I got into my car. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The drive to Ethan's duplex took 20 minutes. I spent every second of it rehearsing what I would say. I needed to be a wall. I needed to be ice. If I showed emotion, they would weaponize it. If I cried, they would call me hysterical. If I yelled, they would call me crazy. I pulled up to the curb in front of their unit. It was a nice place, nicer than mine. There were 2 cars in the driveway, Ethan's sedan and Clara's SUV. A child's bicycle lay on the lawn, though they didn't have kids, which meant Ethan had probably bought it on a whim for a nephew or just because it was on sale. I walked up the path and banged on the door. 3 sharp, hard knocks. It was 11 in the morning on a Saturday. I knew they were awake. but I also knew they wouldn't be productive. After a long minute, the door creaked open. Ethan stood there. He was wearing flannel pajama pants and a stained t-shirt. His hair was a mess, and he looked like he had just rolled out of bed. When he saw me, his expression shifted from groggy annoyance to a defensive sneer. "Rose," he said, scratching his chest. "What are you doing here? I called you like 20 times. You blocked my number?" "We need to talk," I said. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped past him into the living room. The house smelled of stale coffee and something sweet, like artificial vanilla air freshener masking the scent of dirty laundry. The big flat-screen TV, bigger than mine, was paused on a video game. Pizza boxes from the night before were stacked on the coffee table. "Hey," Ethan protested, closing the door and following me. "You can't just barge in here. I'm not dressed." I turned to face him. I planted my feet shoulder-width apart, a stance I had seen my boss use when negotiating contracts. "I just came from the bank records," I said. My voice was low, devoid of the trembling I felt inside. I noticed something interesting about the rent payments for this place. Ethan's face didn't show guilt. It showed exhaustion, the kind of world-weary sigh of a parent dealing with a toddler. "Oh my God, are you here to nag me about money again? Rose, it is Saturday. Can we not do this?" "We are doing this," I said. "I have been paying your rent for 14 months. The auto pay never switched over to your account." "Yeah, well, we had some issues with our bank linking up," Ethan said, waving a hand dismissively as he walked toward the kitchen. "I told you that like a year ago. I figured we would square up when my settlement from the old job came through." "You never told me that," I said, following him. "And you never squared up. You let me pay $17,500 while you bought new gaming consoles and ate takeout." Ethan opened the fridge and took out a carton of orange juice. He drank directly from the carton, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Rose, you are rich. You have that fancy corporate job now. What is a couple of grand between family? I was going to pay you back. I am good for it." "I am not rich," I said, my voice rising slightly before I caught myself. "I am broke because I am paying for 2 lives, but that ends today." Ethan slammed the fridge door shut. "What does that mean?" "It means I just canceled the auto pay," I said. I removed my bank details from the portal. "The rent for July is due in 5 days. You need to pay it." Ethan stared at me. For a second, he looked like he couldn't process the language I was speaking. You canceled it? Without asking me?" "I don't need to ask permission to stop spending my own money," I said. "But we don't have it," Ethan shouted. The sudden volume made me flinch, but I held my ground. "Rose, are you insane? We don't have $1,200 just lying around. Clara's hours got cut, and I'm still waiting on funding for the new venture." "Get a job," I said. "A real one. Wait tables. Drive a truck. I don't care. But I am not your landlord anymore." "You can't do this," he yelled, his face turning red. "We will get evicted. Is that what you want? You want your brother on the street?" "I want my brother to be an adult," I replied. "What is going on down here?" I looked up to see Clara standing at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a silk robe that I knew cost at least $200, because I had been with her when she bought it. She looked down at us, her face a mask of concern. "Rose?" she said, coming down the stairs slowly. "Why is everyone shouting?" "She cut off the rent," Ethan spat, pointing a finger at me. "She came in here and told me she canceled the payment, 5 days before the first of the month." Clara's eyes widened. She looked at me with a soft, wounded expression that she had perfected over the years. It was the look that usually made me crumble. "Rose, honey," she said, walking over and trying to take my hand. I pulled my hand away. "I am sure we can work this out. We are family. You know how hard Ethan has been working. He is so close to a breakthrough. If you just cover us for 2 more months." "No," I said. "Not 2 months, not 2 days." "But we are a team," Clara pleaded. "Remember when we all went to the lake last summer? We promised to always look out for each other. Ethan loves you. He was just stressed at the party. He didn't mean those things. He meant them enough to say them into a microphone, I said. And you stood there and let him. You drank the champagne I paid for and watched my mother laugh at me. Clara bit her lip. That is not fair. We were just trying to keep the mood light. The mood is very heavy now, I said, because the free ride is over. Ethan slammed his hand on the kitchen counter. You are being vindictive. That is what this is. You are just mad because Mom likes me better, and you are trying to buy power. It is pathetic. I am not trying to buy anything, I said calmly. I am trying to stop buying things, specifically, your lifestyle. You are going to kill Mom, Ethan said. His voice dropped to a menacing growl. She is already a mess because you blocked her calls. If you tell her you are evicting us, the stress will give her a heart attack. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason our mother ends up in the hospital? It was a classic Ethan move, the pivot to emotional terrorism. If logic fails, use guilt. If guilt fails, use a hostage. The hostage was always Mom's health. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the anger. He was terrified. He was 32 years old and he had no idea how to survive without a host. Mom's health is not my currency, I said, and her feelings are not my bill to pay. If she is so concerned about your housing, she can pay your rent. She has a retirement fund. Ask her. You know I can't ask her, Ethan screamed. She doesn't have liquid cash like you. I don't have liquid cash. Ethan, I shouted back, finally letting the volume rise. I have a paycheck that I work 50 hours a week for, and it is mine. The silence that followed was ringing. Ethan stared at me, mouth slightly open. He had never seen me explode. He had never seen the black sheep show teeth. Get out, he whispered. Get out of my house. It's not your house, I said, my voice returning to that deadly calm. It's the landlord's house, and unless you come up with $1,250 by Wednesday, it won't be your home either. I turned around and walked toward the door. If you walk out that door, Ethan yelled after me, don't ever come back. You are dead to us. You hear me? You are a selfish, cold-hearted traitor. I reached the front door and opened it. The sunlight hit my face. It was blindingly bright. Goodbye, Ethan, I said without looking back. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. I heard the sound of something shattering inside, maybe a glass, maybe a plate, followed by Clara screaming his name. I walked down the path to my car. My legs felt shaky, like I had just run a marathon, but as I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door, shutting out the noise of the neighborhood, I realized something strange. My chest didn't hurt. The crushing weight that had been sitting on my sternum for years, the constant, low-level anxiety about money and approval, was gone. It was physically gone. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I started the car and put it in drive. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove. Watching the road stretch out in front of me, I had just declared war on my family, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt absolute, terrifying peace. I had drawn a line in the sand, and I was finally standing on the side that belonged to me. The text message arrived on Tuesday afternoon. It was from my mother, and it was deceptively simple. Dinner tonight, 7 o'clock, roast beef. We need to clear the air. There was no apology in the text. There was no acknowledgement of the financial bomb I had dropped on Ethan's lap, nor the screaming match that had taken place in his living room 3 days prior. It was a summons. In the Hanson family, the dinner table was not a place for nourishment. It was a courtroom where the jury was rigged and the verdict was decided before the appetizers were served. I almost didn't go. My thumb hovered over the delete button for a long time, but a part of me, the part that was still curious about how far they would go to twist reality, decided to attend. I wanted to see the performance. I wanted to witness the mental gymnastics they would perform to make me the villain after I had been the one bankrolling their lives. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 7 o'clock. The house looked picture perfect. The lawn was freshly mowed, likely by my father, since Ethan hadn't lifted a finger for manual labor since high school. The windows glowed with a warm, inviting yellow light. To a stranger passing by, it looked like the home of a happy, well-adjusted American family. I walked in. The smell of rosemary and roasting meat hit me instantly. It was a scent that used to mean safety to me, but now it just smelled like obligation. "Rose is here," my mother announced from the kitchen, her voice bright and cheery, as if we were just gathering for a casual Tuesday meal and not a summit to discuss the implosion of our family dynamic. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the ones with the gold rims that we were only supposed to use for Thanksgiving and Christmas. The heavy silver candlesticks were out. The linen napkins were folded into stiff triangles. It was a stage set. My mother was trying to use atmosphere to bully me into submission. If the table looked civilized, then surely I would be the monster if I acted uncivilized. Ethan was already seated. He was wearing a collared shirt, which was a rare sight. He didn't look at me when I entered. He was staring intently at his empty plate, his jaw working as if he were chewing on the inside of his cheek. My father sat at the head of the table, looking tired. He gave me a small, tight nod. "Sit, sit," Mom bustled in, carrying a heavy platter of roast beef. "Everything is hot. Robert, pour the wine." I sat across from Ethan. The silence that descended on the room was thick enough to choke on. The only sounds were the clinking of the carving knife against the platter as my father sliced the meat and the gurgle of red wine being poured into crystal glasses. "So," Mom said, sitting down and shaking out her napkin with a flourish, "I am so glad we could all make time for this. It is important for us to be together." She looked around the table, her eyes resting on me with a look of benevolent concern. "I know emotions have been running high lately," she began, ladling gravy onto her potatoes. "We have all been under a lot of stress. Ethan with his new venture, you with your job. It is natural for tempers to flare, but we are family, and family forgives." I cut into my meat. I didn't say a word. I waited. "I was thinking today about when you two were little," she continued, her voice taking on a misty, nostalgic quality. "Remember when Ethan broke his arm falling out of the tree? Rose, you sat by his bed for 2 days reading to him. You were always so selfless, such a giver." There it was, the bait. She was trying to weaponize my past kindness to shame my present boundaries. Selfless. In her dictionary, selfless meant compliant. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even, "we are not here to talk about when we were 6. I am just saying," she interrupted, her smile tightening, "that deep down, you are a generous person. I know you didn't mean to hurt your brother. I know you acted out of anger. We are willing to overlook it." I stopped chewing. I looked up at her. "Overlook what, exactly?" "The reaction," she said, waving her hand vaguely. "Freezing the accounts, threatening to evict him. It was very dramatic. Rose, very unlike you, but we understand. You were embarrassed at the party." "Embarrassed?" I repeated. "Ethan made a joke," she said, looking at Ethan for confirmation. He nodded stiffly, still not meeting my eyes. "It was a roast. Maybe it was a little poor in taste, sure, but to react by trying to destroy his livelihood? That feels excessive, don't you think?" I looked at Ethan. "Is that what you told her? That I'm destroying your livelihood?" Ethan finally looked up. His eyes were hard, resentful. "You cut off my credit line. Rose, you stranded me at a gas station. You told me to get out of my house. Yeah, I would say that is pretty destructive." "I stopped paying for things I never agreed to buy," I said. "That isn't destruction. That is balancing the books." "Money, money, money," Mom sighed, shaking her head as if I had just cursed at the table. "That is all you talk about now. Since when did you become so transactional? We are talking about human beings here. Your brother is flesh and blood. If he stumbles, we catch him. That is what we do." "He didn't stumble," I said. "He pushed me. He stood on a stage and called me a black sheep. He mocked me, and you laughed." "Oh, stop it," Mom snapped, her veneer of patience cracking. "You are obsessed with that phrase. It was a figure of speech. Why are you so fragile? You are letting 3 words ruin your relationship with your brother. It is incredibly selfish." "Selfish," I whispered. The word tasted bitter. "Yes, selfish," she asserted, leaning forward. "You have done well for yourself. Rose, you have a degree, a good job, no kids to worry about. Ethan has a wife, he has responsibilities. He's trying to build something. Is it really so hard for you to help him out for a little while longer? Just until he gets on his feet? What is $1,200 to you? A few handbags?" I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "I don't buy handbags. Mom, I pay Ethan's rent. Or I did, until 3 days ago." "And that is why we are here," Mom said, switching to a tone of finality. "To fix this, Ethan is willing to apologize for the joke. Aren't you, Ethan?" Ethan mumbled something that sounded like sorry. "There," Mom said, clapping her hands together softly. "He apologized. Now, Rose, you need to apologize for the financial mess you caused. And tomorrow, you will call the bank and the landlord to reinstate the arrangements. We will put this ugly week behind us." She picked up her wine glass, looking satisfied. The trial was over. The judge had ruled. I was to pay the fine and return to my cell. I looked at the roast beef on my plate. It was cold. I was about to stand up. I was about to tell them exactly where they could put their arrangements. But then, a voice spoke from the other end of the table. "He shouldn't have said it." The room went dead silent. We all turned to look at my father. He was staring at his wine glass, his hand gripping the stem so hard his knuckles were white. He hadn't eaten a bite. "Excuse me?" Mom said, her voice sharp. "What did you say, Robert?" My father looked up. For the first time in years, his eyes weren't cloudy with passivity. They were clear, and they looked sad. "I said he shouldn't have said it," Dad repeated, his voice low but steady. "Calling her a black sheep, in front of the whole neighborhood, it wasn't a joke. Linda, it was mean. It was cruel." Mom stared at him, her mouth slightly open. "Robert, whose side are you on?" "There shouldn't be sides," Dad said. He looked at Ethan. "You are 32 years old. Son, you stood there and humiliated your sister, the sister who has been paying your bills, and you didn't even have the decency to look her in the eye when you did it." Ethan's face turned a mottled shade of red. "I was just having fun. Everyone was laughing." "I wasn't laughing," Dad said quietly. "You certainly didn't stop it," Mom hissed at him. "You stood right there at the grill and said nothing. Don't you dare try to play the saint now." "I know," Dad said. "I was a coward. I have been a coward for a long time. I let you coddle him, and I let you take advantage of her." He looked at me, and his eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry, Rose." I felt a lump form in my throat. I hadn't expected this. I had prepared for battle, not for this sudden, quiet surrender from the man who usually blended into the wallpaper. "Robert, shut up," Mom said. Her voice was shaking with rage now. "You are making it worse. We are trying to keep this family together, and you are driving a wedge right down the middle. You are drunk." "I have had one sip," Dad said. "I am not drunk. I am just ashamed." "Ashamed of what?" Mom demanded. "Of supporting your son? You should be ashamed of her." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is the one with the cold heart. She is the one watching her brother drown and refusing to throw a rope." "He isn't drowning, Linda," Dad said wearily. "He is just refusing to swim." Mom slammed her hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "I will not listen to this. You are turning against your own son. Rose has manipulated you. She has poisoned you against us." She turned to me, her eyes full of venom. "Are you happy now? You have turned your father against us. Is that what you wanted? To break everything?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, who was currently looking at me with pure hatred because I had stopped being a resource and started being a person. Then I looked at Ethan. This was his chance. This was the moment where he could have stepped up. He could have said, "Mom, stop. Dad is right. I messed up. I will pay my own rent." He could have saved the dinner. He could have saved some shred of respect. But he didn't. He looked at Mom, then he looked at Dad, and he shrank. He slumped in his chair, picking at a piece of fat on his steak, letting his mother fight his battle. He was a vacuum of a man, absorbing energy and offering nothing in return. I realized then that there was nothing to say. No argument would penetrate Mom's delusion. No logic would make Ethan grow a spine. And while Dad's defense was touching, it was 20 years too late. He was a prisoner in this house just as much as I had been, but he wasn't leaving. I placed my napkin on the table. I didn't fold it. I just dropped it next to my plate. "Where are you going?" Mom demanded as I pushed my chair back. "We are not finished." "I am," I said. I stood up. I felt tall. "Rose, sit down," Mom ordered. "If you walk out now, you are proving everything I said about you. You are proving that you don't care about this family." "I care enough to stop participating in the lie," I said calmly. I looked at my father. "Thank you, Dad, for saying that." He nodded, looking down at his plate again. He had fired his one shot, and now he was retreating back into his shell. I didn't blame him. He had to live with her. I didn't. I walked out of the dining room. "Rose!" Mom screamed after me. "Don't you dare walk away from me! Rose!" I heard Ethan mutter something like, "Let her go. Mom, she's crazy." I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cool night air. The door clicked shut behind me, muting the sounds of the argument that was erupting inside. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't turn back to look at the house. I knew what was happening in there. Mom was rewriting the narrative, painting herself as the martyr and me as the villain. Ethan was agreeing with her to keep the peace and his potential inheritance. Dad was retreating into silence. It was a tragedy. But for the first time, I wasn't a character in it. I was just a member of the audience who had decided to leave the theater early. The drive from my parents' house to my apartment usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 15. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached, and my mind was a blur of adrenaline and disbelief. I had just walked out on my family. I had just stood up to the tribunal. I felt a strange mixture of nausea and liberation, like I had just jumped out of a plane and wasn't sure if the parachute would open. I turned the corner onto my street, a quiet row of garden-style apartments where people mostly kept to themselves. I just wanted to get inside, lock the bolt, and scream into a pillow until my throat was raw. But as I approached my building, I saw flashing hazard lights. A large white rental box truck was double-parked directly in front of the walkway leading to my unit. It was blocking 2 parking spots, its engine idling with a low diesel rumble. The back gate was rolled up, revealing a cavernous dark space half filled with furniture. I slowed my car to a crawl. My stomach dropped. I recognized the beat-up leather sofa sitting near the edge of the truck bed. I had helped carry that sofa into Ethan's duplex 2 years ago. I parked my car illegally by a fire hydrant because there was nowhere else to go and jumped out. The humidity of the night hit me, but I was already sweating cold fear. "Careful with that. That is a vintage console." I heard Ethan's voice before I saw him. He was standing on the sidewalk, gesturing wildly at 2 large men in blue jumpsuits who were struggling with a heavy television stand. Ethan was still wearing the collared shirt from dinner, but it was unbuttoned at the top now, and he looked manic. I marched up the sidewalk, my heels clicking sharply on the concrete. "Ethan!" He spun around. When he saw me, his face didn't register shame or surprise. It registered relief. "Finally!" he shouted, throwing his hands up. "Where have you been? I have been texting you. I don't have a key. So we have been waiting out here for 10 minutes. Open the door so they can start bringing the big stuff in." I stopped 3 feet away from him. I felt like I was in a fever dream. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like?" Ethan snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I am moving in, just for a few weeks, until I sort out the cash flow situation you caused. Now, hurry up. These guys charge by the hour." He turned back to the movers. "Okay, guys, pivoted on the corner. Watch the paint." "Stop!" I yelled. My voice echoed off the brick walls of the apartment complex. The two movers froze, the TV stand hovering in midair. They looked at me, then at Ethan, then back at me. They were tired men who just wanted to finish their shift, not get involved in a domestic dispute. "Put it down," I told them. "Do not take another step toward that door." "Rose, don't be dramatic," Ethan hissed, stepping toward me. "Look, I know you are mad about dinner. I get it. But Clara and I can't stay at the duplex. The landlord came by after you left the other day and served a notice. We have nowhere else to go." "That is not my problem," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You are not moving in here. I live in a 600-square-foot, one-bedroom apartment. There is no room, and even if there was, the answer is no." "We will sleep on the floor. I don't care," Ethan yelled. "We just need a roof. Clara is packing the rest of the stuff. I brought the essentials. Now open the door." "No," I said. Ethan's face darkened. He looked over my shoulder, scanning the parking lot. I followed his gaze. Parked across the street, idling in the shadows under a street lamp, was my mother's sedan. I couldn't see her face through the glare of the windshield, but I knew she was there. She had followed me. She was sitting there, watching, waiting for me to cave. She knew Ethan was doing this. She had probably coordinated it. "Go to your sister's house," she would have said. "She won't turn you away once you are on the doorstep." It was an ambush. "You really want to do this here?" Ethan challenged. Stepping into my personal space, he loomed over me, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "In front of your neighbors? You want to be the heartless sister who kicks her brother out on the street at 9 o'clock at night?" "I am not kicking you out," I said, holding my ground. "I never invited you in." "I am family," he screamed. A light flickered on in the unit above mine, then another. A window opened. I heard the murmur of voices. We were drawing a crowd. "Hey, lady," one of the movers called out, shifting the weight of the furniture. "We need a decision here. In or out? This thing is heavy." "Out," I said firmly. "Put it back on the truck." "Don't listen to her," Ethan shouted at them. "I am paying you. Bring it inside." "You are paying them?" I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "With what money, Ethan? The money I gave you? Or are you going to bounce a check and let them deal with it?" The movers exchanged a look. The mention of payment issues was the magic word. They set the TV stand down on the sidewalk with a heavy thud. "Buddy," the older mover said, wiping his hands on his pants, "if this isn't your place, we can't move you in. Liability issues. We aren't breaking and entering." "It is my sister's place," Ethan argued, his voice cracking. "She is just being a bitch because she is on a power trip." He turned to the growing audience. Neighbors were now stepping out onto their balconies. Mrs. Higgins from 2B was leaning over the railing in her bathrobe. A guy walking his dog had stopped on the sidewalk to watch. Ethan spread his arms wide, addressing the crowd like he was back on the stage at the graduation party. "You see this?" he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "This is what she does. My own sister. I have nowhere to go. My wife and I are destitute, and she stands there in her designer heels and tells me to sleep on the curb. How do you sleep at night? Rose? How?" I felt the eyes of the neighbors on me. The shame was hot and prickling, crawling up my neck. This was exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to be so embarrassed, so mortified by the public spectacle, that I would open the door just to make it stop. That was how the Hansons operated. Public appearances were everything. Threaten the image, and you get compliance. But as I looked at him, sweaty, desperate, screaming lies to strangers, I didn't feel the urge to hide. I felt a cold, hard resolve. I turned to the neighbors. I didn't scream. I didn't wave my arms. I just spoke clearly. "My brother is 32 years old," I said. "I have paid his rent for 14 months. I have paid his car notes. I have paid his loans. 3 days ago, he publicly mocked me for it. Tonight, he tried to break into my home because I finally cut him off." I looked back at Ethan. "I am done playing your game. Ethan, you want to tell them I am the bad guy? Go ahead. Tell them everything, but you are not crossing that threshold." Ethan looked stunned. He hadn't expected me to address the crowd. He hadn't expected me to air the dirty laundry. He looked up at Mrs. Higgins, who was now looking at him with distinct disapproval. She is lying, Ethan stammered, but the fire had gone out of his performance. He looked like a child whose tantrum had failed to yield candy. He turned to the movers, desperate to regain control. Just pick it up. I will break the window if I have to. We are getting in. He lunged for the TV stand, trying to lift one end of it himself. Hey, hands off, the mover barked, stepping between Ethan and the furniture. You are done, pal. We are terminating the job. Unsafe work environment. You can't leave, Ethan shrieked, grabbing the mover's arm. I have a contract. The mover, a man who looked like he lifted refrigerators for fun, easily shook Ethan off. Touch me again, and I call the cops. We are unloading the rest of the stuff on the curb and we are leaving. You can sort this mess out yourself. No, Ethan panicked. You can't leave it on the curb. It will get stolen. It is going to rain. Should have thought of that before you tried to raid a lady's apartment, the mover said. They began to efficiently haul the rest of the items out of the truck, dumping boxes and loose chairs onto the grass strip between the sidewalk and the street. It was a chaotic pile of Ethan's life, a lampshade rolling into the gutter, a bag of clothes spilling open. Ethan stood in the middle of the wreckage, looking small and defeated. He looked toward the street, toward Mom's car. I saw the brake lights of the sedan flare red. Mom had seen enough. The plan had failed. She wasn't going to get out and help him. She wasn't going to stand in the street and argue with movers. That would be beneath her. That would be messy. She put the car in gear and drove away. Ethan watched her taillights disappear around the corner. His shoulders slumped. He looked completely abandoned. For a second, a pang of pity struck me. He was pathetic. He was a man-child who had never been taught how to survive. And now he was standing on a sidewalk in the dark, surrounded by his worldly possessions, with no one to call. But then I remembered the smirk. I remembered the black sheep. I stepped forward, blocking the path to my door with my body. You need to call a taxi, Ethan, I said. And you need to get this stuff off my property before the complex management tows it. Where am I supposed to go? He whispered. He sounded broken. Rose, seriously, I have no money. Clara is at her mom's, but they don't have room for me. I have nowhere. You have a degree, I said. You have 2 hands. You have a brain. Use them. Maybe, I said, but I will die with my bills paid. I turned my back on him. I walked to my door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. I engaged the chain. Outside, I could hear Ethan shouting at the movers again, his voice cracking with desperation. I heard the truck engine rev as the movers drove away. Then, silence, save for the distant sound of Ethan kicking a box. I slid down to the floor, my back against the wood. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was shaking, but the door was locked. The invasion had been repelled. I was the black sheep, yes, but the black sheep had a fortress now, and the wolves were finally stuck outside. The morning sun that filtered through my blinds should have signaled a fresh start. Instead, it illuminated a nightmare that had migrated from my front lawn to the digital world. I woke up not to the sound of birds, but to the incessant, angry buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. It was vibrating so hard it was slowly dancing toward the edge of the table. I picked it up, squinting against the glare. I had 43 text messages, 12 missed calls, and over 90 notifications from Facebook and Instagram. My stomach turned over. I knew, with the heavy intuition of someone who has lived in the shadow of a narcissist, exactly what had happened. I opened the Facebook app. The first thing on my feed was a photo of Ethan. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. He was sitting on the curb outside my apartment complex, illuminated by the harsh yellow street lamp from the night before. He was huddled in a hoodie, looking small and dejected, sitting next to a singular, pathetic cardboard box. He had cropped out the moving truck. He had cropped out the mountains of furniture. He had cropped out the fact that he was a 32-year-old man who had tried to invade his sister's home. The caption read, I never thought it would come to this. Last night, my own sister, my flesh and blood, looked me in the eye and told me to sleep on the street. She has made it big now, and apparently, family does not fit into her new life. Heartbroken does not even begin to cover it. Pray for Clara and me as we try to find a place to rest our heads tonight. Family betrayal, heartless. The real Rose. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a lie so bold, so carefully constructed, that it was almost impressive. I clicked on the comments. This was where the real damage lived. Aunt Brenda had written, "Oh my God, Ethan, this is horrific. I cannot believe she would do this. Do you need money for a motel?" My high school lab partner, someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years, commented, "Wow, money really does change people. Stay strong, man." Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor back in Cedar Ridge, added, "I always knew she was a little cold, but this is evil. Leaving family on the street? Shameful." There were dozens of them. People who didn't know the story. People who didn't know I had paid his rent for 14 months. People who didn't know I was drowning in debt because of him. They were all judging me based on a single, grainy photo and a caption written by a professional liar. The court of public opinion had convened while I was sleeping, and I had been sentenced to social death without a trial. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I knew I shouldn't answer. I knew it would just be noise. But the injustice was burning a hole in my chest. I swiped right. "How could you?" She didn't even say hello. Her voice was a screech of pure panic. "Good morning to you too, Mom," I said, my voice hoarse. "Don't you get smart with me," she yelled. "Have you seen Facebook? Have you seen what people are saying? My phone has been ringing off the hook since 6 in the morning. Mrs. Gable from the church committee called to ask if I raised a sociopath." "Did you tell Mrs. Gable that Ethan tried to break into my apartment?" I asked, walking into the kitchen and pouring water with a shaking hand. "Did you tell her that I paid his rent for over a year and he lied about it?" "Nobody cares about the details. Rose," she screamed. "They care about the picture. They care that your brother looks like a homeless person because you locked him out. You have humiliated us. You have dragged the Hansen name through the mud." "I didn't post the picture, Mom. Ethan did," I reminded her. "Because he is hurting," she defended him instantly. "He is lashing out because he is in pain, and instead of fixing it, you are making it worse. You need to fix this, right now." "Fix it how?" I asked. "By letting him move in? By giving him my bank account number?" "By making peace," she insisted. "You need to apologize. You need to comment on that post and say it was a misunderstanding. Tell everyone you were stressed and you are helping him now. We need to control the narrative before this spreads any further." I closed my eyes. Control the narrative. That was her only god. She didn't care that her son was a leech. She cared that the neighbors knew he was a leech. "I am not going to lie for him anymore," I said quietly. "Then you are on your own," she spat. "If you don't fix this by noon, don't bother coming home for Christmas. Don't bother coming home for anything. You are proving everyone right. You really are the black sheep." The line went dead. I put the phone down on the counter. The silence in the apartment was deafening, but inside my head, it was a cacophony. I looked at the comments again. Cruel, heartless, snob. I could delete my account. I could hide. I could let the storm pass. That was what the old Rose would have done. She would have retreated, cried, and eventually apologized just to make the noise stop. She would have paid Ethan off just to delete the post. But the old Rose was dead. She had died the moment Ethan grabbed that microphone. I realized something with crystal clarity. If I stayed silent, his lie became the truth. If I didn't tell my story, history would be written by the person with the loudest voice and the fewest morals. I wasn't going to comment on the post. A Facebook comment war was undignified and ineffective. I needed something stronger. I needed a confrontation that couldn't be deleted. I picked up my phone and typed a text to Ethan. "Meet me at the Daily Grind at 2 o'clock. Don't be late." I didn't ask how he was. I didn't ask where he slept. I just gave a command. He replied almost instantly, bringing Clara. And you better have your checkbook. He thought he had won. He thought the public pressure had broken me. He thought I was meeting him to surrender, to pay the ransom to get my reputation back. I put the phone down and walked to my filing cabinet. I pulled out a fresh, crisp manila folder. I spent the next 3 hours compiling a document. I printed out the bank statements I had highlighted 3 days ago. I printed out the lease agreement where I was listed as a guarantor. I printed out the text messages from last year where he promised to pay me back next week over and over again. I printed out the email confirmation from the property management company showing the total sum of $17,500 drawn from my account. I punched holes in the papers. I organized them chronologically. I used sticky notes to flag the most damning transactions. It wasn't just a file, it was an indictment. At 1:45, I walked into the Daily Grind. It was a hipster coffee shop downtown, neutral ground, filled with people working on laptops who wouldn't care about a family squabble unless it got loud. I sat at a corner table. I ordered a black coffee. I placed the folder face down on the table. At 2 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Ethan and Clara walked in. They looked like they had dressed for a funeral, or perhaps a press conference. Ethan was wearing dark sunglasses indoors, adding to his dramatic persona. Clara looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed, clinging to Ethan's arm like a fragile bird. They spotted me and marched over. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. Clara sat next to him, refusing to look at me. "I hope you are happy," Ethan said, taking off his sunglasses and tossing them onto the table. "We slept at a Motel 6 last night. Clara has back pain. I see you had time to update your Facebook status. Though," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "That must have been difficult with such spotty Wi-Fi." Ethan smirked. It was a nasty, triumphant little twitch of his lips. "People are angry. Rose, they don't like it when rich sisters forget where they came from. I have had 3 people offer to start a GoFundMe for us. Imagine that. Strangers care more about me than you do." "So that was the plan?" I asked. "Shame me into compliance?" "It is not a plan. It is reality," Ethan said, leaning back and crossing his arms. "You messed up. You looked bad. But I am willing to fix it. If you transfer the deposit for a new apartment today, and maybe cover the first 3 months of rent so we can get settled, I will take the post down. I will even write a follow-up saying we made up. Family is family, right?" Clara looked up, her eyes hopeful. "Rose, please, we just want to go back to normal. We can't live out of a car." "You aren't living out of a car. You are in a motel," I corrected her. "And you have a job, Clara, or you did. Why aren't you paying for the room?" "This isn't about her," Ethan snapped. "This is about you making this right. So, do you have the check?" He held out his hand, palm up. The arrogance was breathtaking. He truly believed that the fear of bad publicity was stronger than my self-respect. I looked at his hand. Then I looked at the folder on the table. "I didn't bring a check," I said. Ethan's hand dropped. His face hardened. "Then why are we here? To waste my time. I am telling you, Rose, I will let that post stay up forever. I will go to the local paper. I will tell everyone what a monster you are." "I brought this," I said. I slid the folder across the table. Ethan looked at it suspiciously. "What is this? A contract?" "Open it," I said. He flipped the cover open. The first page was a summary sheet I had created. It listed the total amount I had given him over the last 3 years, broken down by category: rent, loans, emergency, cash, and miscellaneous. The total was bolded at the bottom: $34,250. Ethan stared at the number. He flipped the page. He saw the highlighted bank statements. He saw the transaction logs. He saw the undeniable, mathematical proof of his dependency. What is this?" he stammered, his face losing its color. "That is the truth," I said. "That is the receipt for the black sheep's generosity. You told the world I kicked you out. You forgot to mention that I bought the roof you were living under." "So what?" Ethan sneered. trying to regain his footing. You think showing me this changes anything? It is just paper. Nobody cares about your spreadsheets. Rows. I think the IRS might care, I said calmly. Ethan froze. The air seemed to leave his lungs in a rush. Excuse me? I noticed something interesting when I was compiling this, I said, tapping the document. You have been claiming the rent I paid as a business expense on your tax returns for your consulting firm. I saw the draft returns on your desk when I visited last month. You claimed you paid the rent, but I paid the rent. That is tax fraud. Ethan. You don't know that, he whispered. His eyes were darting around the room now, checking if anyone was listening. I also think the people commenting on your Facebook post might care, I continued, ignoring his denial. You see, I am not going to comment on your post. I am going to make my own post, and I'm going to upload this entire PDF file, every page, every bank transfer, every text where you begged for money. I will tag Aunt Brenda. I will tag Mrs. Henderson. I will tag your old high school friends. I leaned forward. I will let them decide who the ungrateful one is. I will let them see that the black sheep has been financing the Golden Boy's life for a decade. Do you think they will still want to donate to your GoFundMe when they realize you have drained me of $30,000? Ethan looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at Clara. Clara was reading the text messages in the folder, her hand covering her mouth. She hadn't known the extent of it. He had lied to her too. You wouldn't, Ethan hissed. It would destroy the family and Mom would never forgive you. Mom has already disowned me, I said. I have nothing left to lose. But you? You have a reputation to lose. You have a fraud investigation to lose. I reached across the table and tapped the folder again. You have two choices. Ethan, option A. You leave this coffee shop, you delete that post, and you post a retraction apologizing for lying. Then you never ask me for a cent again. Option B. I go home, I scan this, and I hit publish, and then I call the fraud tip line. The silence stretched between us. The espresso machine whirred in the background. A barista called out, "Caramel macchiato for Dave." Ethan looked down at the papers. His hands were shaking. He was trapped. He had brought a knife to a gunfight, and he had just realized the gun was loaded. "You are a psycho," he whispered. "I am a businesswoman," I corrected him. "TikTok, Ethan, I have a scanner at home and I'm itching to use it." He glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, but underneath the hate, there was fear. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew that if this file got out, his entire carefully curated image of the victimized entrepreneur would shatter into dust. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. His thumbs moved aggressively over the screen. "Done," he spat. "It is gone." I checked my phone. I refreshed the page. The post was gone. The comments were gone. The lie had been erased. "And the retraction?" I asked. "I am not writing a retraction," he growled. "That is humiliating." "More humiliating than tax fraud?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He gritted his teeth. He typed again. A moment later, a new post appeared. My previous post was written in anger and was not accurate. My sister has helped us a lot over the years. We are working through family issues privately. It was weak. It was passive-aggressive. But it was a surrender. "Good enough," I said. I reached out and took the folder back. I closed it. "This stays with me," I said, "as insurance. If you ever try to smear my name again, or if you ever ask Mom to pressure me for money again, this goes public. Do we understand each other?" Ethan stood up so abruptly his chair screeched against the floor. "Come on, Clara, we are leaving." Clara stood up slowly. She looked at me. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Not anger, but maybe realization. She looked at the folder in my hand, then at her husband's back as he stormed toward the exit. She didn't say goodbye. She just followed him. I sat there for a moment, watching them leave. I touched the cool cover of the folder. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted. The feeling of regaining gravity. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but for the first time in 3 days, I could taste it. I had won the battle, but as I watched Ethan shove the door open and disappear onto the street, I knew the war wasn't over. People like Ethan didn't learn lessons. They just changed tactics, and I had to be ready for the next one. The victory at the coffee shop felt hollow before the caffeine even hit my bloodstream. Yes, Ethan had deleted the post. And yes, the public shaming had temporarily ceased. But as I drove home, my phone pinged with a notification from a mutual cousin. It was a screenshot of a private message Ethan had sent to a group chat I wasn't part of. I took the post down because Rose came crying to me. She is mentally unstable and I didn't want to push her over the edge. I am the bigger person here. I stared at the screen at a red light. He hadn't learned a thing. He was just pivoting. He was treating the deletion not as an admission of guilt, but as an act of charity toward a crazy sister. The narrative hadn't changed. He had just moved it underground where I couldn't see it. I realized then that emotional leverage wasn't enough. Social pressure wasn't enough. Ethan was a creature of opportunity, and as long as he thought he could spin a story to his advantage without real consequences, he would. I needed to stop playing with feelings and start playing with the law. I spent the next 48 hours building a weapon that couldn't be spun. I didn't just compile bank statements this time. I dug deeper. I pulled the loan agreements where he had forged my initials on a co-signer addendum 3 years ago, something I had let slide at the time to keep the peace. I downloaded the public tax records for his consulting business, which showed zero reported income despite him claiming my rent payments as business expenses on his loan applications. I organized the texts where he admitted to using investor money for a vacation to Cabo. I put it all into a binder. It wasn't a messy stack of papers anymore. It was a dossier. It looked like something a prosecutor would slam onto a desk in a courtroom drama. I tracked him down on a Thursday afternoon. He wasn't at a job interview. He wasn't looking for an apartment. He was at a sports bar on the edge of town, sitting in a booth with 2 guys I vaguely recognized as potential investors he had been courting. I walked in. The air smelled of stale beer and fryer grease. I didn't wait to be seated. I walked straight to his booth. Ethan looked up, a half-eaten chicken wing in his hand. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed, but he put on a show for his audience. "Well, look who it is," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "The prodigal sister. Come to apologize in person?" The 2 men across from him looked at me with curiosity. "I need a moment with my brother," I said to them. My voice was calm, professional, and left no room for argument. "Alone, unless you want to be deposed as witnesses in a fraud investigation." The word fraud acted like a taser. The 2 men exchanged a glance, grabbed their beers, and slid out of the booth faster than I had ever seen anyone move. Ethan watched them go, his jaw tightening. "You are embarrassing me. Rose, again, what is wrong with you?" "Sit down," I said, sliding into the seat opposite him. I placed the binder on the sticky table. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud. Ethan looked at it, then let out a short, dismissive laugh. He leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, adopting the posture of a man who believes he is untouchable. "What is this?" he sneered. "Another scrapbook of your receipts? Rose, we already did this. I took the post down. You won. Go pop a bottle of champagne and leave me alone." "You didn't take the narrative down," I said. "You are still telling people I am unstable. You are still playing the victim. And frankly, I am bored of it. So I am offering you a final deal." "A deal?" He smirked. "You have nothing to offer me." "I have your freedom," I said. I opened the binder. I didn't start with the rent checks this time. I started with the tax documents and the loan application. "This," I said, pointing to a highlighted section, "is a federal loan application you submitted 2 years ago. You listed me as a silent partner. You listed my income as your business revenue. I never agreed to be a partner, and that money never went to a business. It went to your car and your credit card debt." Ethan's smirk faltered slightly. "That was just paperwork. Mom said it was fine." "Mom is not the federal government," I replied. "This is bank fraud. It carries a sentence of up to 30 years in prison and a fine of up to $1 million. I flipped the page. And this is the text thread where you admitted to Clara that you were hiding assets during your brief separation last year. That is perjury in a domestic case, even if you got back together. Ethan shifted in his seat. He looked at the papers, then back at me. You are bluffing. You wouldn't report your own brother. It would kill Dad. Dad is already dying a slow death watching you drain the life out of this family, I said. I am done protecting his feelings at the expense of my reality. I closed the binder. I rested my hand on top of it. Here are your two choices, I said, my voice steady and cold. Option 1. You go onto Facebook, Instagram, and that group chat you are running. You write a full, public retraction. You admit that you lied about my financial support. You admit that I have paid your rent for over a year, and then you sign a legally binding promissory note agreeing to pay back the $34,000 you owe me on a payment plan of my choosing. Ethan laughed again, but it sounded wet and nervous. You are insane. I am not signing a debt note. I don't have that kind of money. Then we go with option 2, I said. I take this binder, and I drive straight to the district attorney's office, then I drive to the IRS field office, and then I drive to the bank that holds your loan. You wouldn't, he whispered. Try me, I said. You are a monster, he hissed. You want to send me to jail? Over money? Not over money, I corrected him. Over the character assassination. You tried to ruin my reputation because I stopped letting you steal from me. Now I am just returning the favor with interest. Ethan stared at me. He was searching for the crack in my armor, the tremble in my lip, the sign that the little sister who used to cover for him was still in there. He didn't find her. You are bluffing, he said again, though his voice lacked conviction. You don't have the guts. You are just trying to scare me. I thought you might say that, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it across the table. This is the distribution list, I said. Ethan looked down. It was a list of names and email addresses. 1. Special Agent Miller, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. 2. The loan officer at First National Bank. 3. Your landlord. 4. The 2 investors who just walked away from this table. 5. Clara's parents. Ethan's face went white. It wasn't a pale white. It was a gray, sickly color. His eyes bulged as he read the names. Clara's parents were old money conservative. If they knew he was a fraud, they would cut Clara off, and his safety net would vanish instantly. You have these emails ready? He stammered. They are in my drafts folder. I lied. They weren't in drafts. They were scheduled to send automatically in 2 hours if I didn't cancel them. All I have to do is do nothing. Ethan looked at the list, then at the binder, then at me. His hands were shaking so hard the ice in his empty glass rattled. He realized, finally, that he wasn't dealing with a family dispute. He was dealing with an existential threat. He wasn't afraid of hurting me. He wasn't afraid of lying. He was afraid of losing the lifestyle he had scammed his way into. He pulled his phone out. He didn't sneer this time. He looked like a man defusing a bomb. He opened Facebook. He typed. He deleted. He typed again. Read it to me, I commanded. He swallowed hard. I want to apologize to my sister Rose. I was angry and I lied about her kicking me out. The truth is, she has supported me financially for a long time, and I was ungrateful. I am sorry for the confusion. Add the part about the rent, I said. Rose. Add it. He typed again. She paid my rent for 14 months. I owe her a lot. Post it, I said, and the group chat. He did it. He showed me the screen. The post was live. The message to the family group chat was sent. Now the promissory note, I said, pulling a document out of the binder pocket. It acknowledges the debt. It sets a payment of $50 a month. It is symbolic more than anything, but it makes the debt legal. Ethan signed it. He didn't even read the terms. He just scribbled his name, desperate to get the binder away from me. Are we done? He asked, his voice trembling. Did you get your pound of flesh? I took the paper and the binder. I stood up. We are done, I said. I looked down at him. He was slumped in the booth, defeated, terrified, and hating me with every fiber of his being. He hadn't apologized because he was sorry. He hadn't deleted the lies because he felt guilty. He had done it because he was afraid of the consequences. You know, Ethan, I said quietly, I used to think you were just misguided, but now I know you are just a coward. I turned and walked out of the bar. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I had the signed confession. I had the public apology. I had the victory. But as I unlocked my car, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a cold, sobering certainty. Ethan hadn't changed. He had just been cornered. He would wait. He would regroup. He would find a new angle. He was a survivor, like a cockroach that scurries away when the light turns on. I looked at the binder on the passenger seat. I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the end of the beginning. For the first time in my adult life, I opened my banking app without holding my breath. It had been 3 months since the confrontation in the sports bar. 3 months since I forced Ethan to sign the promissory note. In that time, the landscape of my life had shifted from a barren wasteland of debt to something resembling a garden. The balance on the screen was not just a number. It was proof of my liberation. There were no surprise withdrawals, no overdraft fees triggered by a brother's impulse buy, just the steady, rhythmic accumulation of my own hard work. I was working at Horizon Strategy Group, a mid-sized consulting firm in the city. For years, I had treated this job as merely a paycheck, a way to keep the lights on for everyone else. But now that I wasn't emotionally exhausted every morning, I found I actually had energy for the work. I had started staying late, not to avoid going home, but because I was engaged. I poured myself into a complex merger analysis for a client in the retail sector. I caught a discrepancy in the supply chain data that the senior partners had missed. Good catch, Hansen, my boss, Mr. Sterling, had said during the Monday briefing, nodding at me with genuine approval. That kind of detail saves us millions. It was a simple compliment, but it felt like rain on parched earth. At home, my attention to detail was called nagging. Here, it was called asset protection. I was being paid to be exactly who I was. That newfound confidence spilled over into other areas of my life. 2 weeks ago, I had reconnected with Liam, an old friend from my university days. Liam was the opposite of Ethan. He was quiet, intense, and brilliant with code. We met for lunch at a bistro that didn't smell like grease, and he pitched me an idea. He was building a platform for freelance creatives to manage their contracts and invoices, a tool to help people avoid exactly the kind of financial mess I had just escaped. He called it Freelance Fort. He didn't ask me for a loan. He didn't ask for a favor. He asked for an investment. I need $10,000 for the initial server costs and legal incorporation, Liam said, sliding a thick, bound document across the table. This is the prospectus, this is the risk assessment, and this is the equity offer. You would own 5% of the company. I stared at the document. It was professional. It was respectful. You want me to read it? I asked, remembering how Ethan used to shove papers at me and say, just sign it. Mom says it is fine. I insist you read it, Liam said. Don't give me a dime until you are sure. I read it. I consulted a lawyer friend, and yesterday, I had wired the money. Transferring $10,000 to Liam felt completely different from transferring $50 to Ethan. With Ethan, the money vanished into a black hole of bad decisions. With Liam, the money was a seed. I wasn't losing it. I was planting it. For the first time, my resources were being treated with dignity. I was a partner, not a purse. I was naive to think I could keep this happiness to myself. I had updated my LinkedIn profile to list myself as an angel investor for Freelance Fort, mostly as a favor to Liam to boost the company's credibility. It was a small professional update, but in the ecosystem of small towns, gossip travels faster than fiber optic internet. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. I saw Mom on the caller ID. I hesitated. We hadn't spoken since I threatened to report Ethan for fraud. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see if she was calling to apologize. I was wrong. "So," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar, icy disappointment. "I hear you are rich now." "Hello to you too, Mom," I said, stirring my pasta sauce. "I am not rich. I am just working." "Don't play coy with me, Rose," she snapped. "Aunt Brenda saw your internet update. You gave $10,000 to some boy? Some stranger?" "Liam is not a stranger. He is a business partner," I said calmly. "And it is an investment." "An investment," she repeated, making the word sound like a slur. "You have $10,000 to throw away on a gamble with an outsider, but you couldn't help your own brother keep a roof over his head? Do you know how sick that looks?" "Ethan has a roof," I said. "He is renting a perfectly adequate apartment on the east side. I know, because I see the $50 payments come in every month." "He is living in a shoebox," she cried. "He is miserable. Clara is miserable. And you are out there playing Shark Tank, throwing money at people who don't love you. You are choosing strangers over your own blood. Rose, it is unnatural." "I am choosing people who respect me," I said. "Liam signed a contract. He showed me a business plan. Ethan showed me a fake eviction notice and a guilt trip." "He is your brother," she yelled. "He made a mistake, one mistake, and you punish him forever. You are cold. Rose, you are going to end up a lonely, bitter woman with a big bank account and no one to hold your hand." "I would rather be lonely than used," I said. "I have to go. Mom, my dinner is burning." I hung up. My hand wasn't shaking this time. Her words didn't cut like they used to. They just bounced off the armor I had built. I realized she wasn't actually mad that I invested money. She was mad that she had lost control of where that money went. But there was something else, a variable that didn't fit. Ethan hadn't called. Usually, when Mom got worked up, it was because Ethan had wound her up first. They operated as a tag team. Ethan would complain, Mom would attack, and then Ethan would swoop in to collect the debris. But my phone was silent. No nasty texts from Ethan, no sarcastic comments on my LinkedIn, no threats. I checked his social media. He hadn't posted in 2 weeks. His last post was the forced apology I had made him write. It was uncharacteristic. Ethan was an attention addict. Silence from him wasn't a sign of peace. It was a sign of plotting. He was like a child who goes quiet in the other room. You know he isn't sleeping. You know he is drawing on the walls with a permanent marker. A knot of unease began to form in my stomach. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe the legal threat had actually worked. Maybe he was scared straight. Maybe he was actually working. The answer arrived on a Thursday. I came home late from the office, exhausted but satisfied. The sun was setting, casting long purple shadows across the walkway to my apartment. I stopped at the cluster of metal mailboxes near the entrance. I unlocked box 4B and pulled out the usual stack: a utility bill, a coupon for pizza, a credit card offer, and a large, thick yellow envelope. There was no return address. My name and address were typed on a white label in a generic font. It wasn't stamped. It had been hand-delivered. I stood there on the sidewalk, the rest of the mail forgotten in my other hand. The envelope felt heavy. It had a texture that made my skin crawl. It wasn't a letter. It felt like documents. I walked up to my apartment, my heart rate picking up speed. I got inside, locked the door, and turned on the kitchen light. I placed the envelope on the counter. I grabbed a pair of scissors. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. Was it a lawsuit? Had Ethan found a lawyer shady enough to sue me for emotional distress? Was it a threat? I sliced the top of the envelope open. I reached in and pulled out a stack of papers. They were paper-clipped together. The first page was a printout of an email. My eyes scanned the header. The sender was an email address I didn't recognize. titaniumventures@securemail.com. The recipient was a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. The subject line read, Pitch deck. Secure logistics solution. Proprietary. I frowned. Logistics solution? That sounded like Liam's project. I flipped to the second page. It was a pitch deck, a PowerPoint presentation printed out in black and white. The title slide said, Logitech, the future of freelance logistics. I turned the page. The executive summary was familiar. It was word for word the summary Liam had shown me at lunch. The market analysis was identical. The revenue projections were identical. The only thing that was different was the names. Where Liam's name should have been, it said, Founder, Ethan Hansen. And where my name should have been listed as an investor, there was nothing. I felt a cold chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I flipped through the rest of the document. It was a complete copy of Liam's intellectual property, the code architecture, the business model, the branding strategy. Ethan had stolen it all. But how? I had the only copy of the prospectus besides Liam. I hadn't shown it to anyone. I kept it in my breath hitched. I kept it in my home office, on my desk. I remembered the day of the invasion, the day Ethan tried to move in. He had been outside with the movers, but before that, a week before that, I had let Mom into the apartment to use the bathroom when she dropped off a box of old winter coats. She had been in there alone for 10 minutes. I looked at the date on the email printout. It was sent yesterday. Ethan wasn't silent because he was sorry. He was silent because he was busy. He had taken the one thing I was proud of, my independent investment, my partnership with a friend, and he had cannibalized it. He was trying to sell Liam's idea as his own to investors who didn't know his history of fraud. And he had sent me the evidence. Why? I turned the stack of papers over. On the back of the last page, there was a sticky note. It was written in Ethan's handwriting, the loops jagged and aggressive. Rose, thanks for the market research. Since you love investing so much, I figured I would cut out the middleman. By the time your friend finds out, I will have the funding and the patent pending. Unless, of course, you want to forgive that little debt of mine? Your move. I stared at the note. He wasn't just stealing. He was blackmailing me. He was holding Liam's future hostage to erase his past mistakes. He thought he had checkmated me. He thought that because I cared about Liam, I would capitulate to protect him. He thought I would burn the promissory note to save the company. He was right about one thing. I did care. But he was wrong about the rest. He thought he was playing a game of family secrets. He didn't realize that by stealing intellectual property and sending evidence of it across state lines to investors, he wasn't just being a bad brother anymore. He had just committed a federal crime, again. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Mom. I didn't call Ethan. I called Liam. Hey, Rose, Liam answered, sounding cheerful. What is up? Liam, I said, my voice deadly calm. Do not panic, but I need you to call your lawyer, and then I need you to come over here. We have a problem, but I also have the solution. I looked at the envelope on the counter. Ethan had sent it to taunt me. He thought it was a victory lap. He didn't realize he had just mailed me the nail for his own coffin. Liam arrived at my apartment 19 minutes after I called him. He didn't knock. He texted, I am here. And I opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, his face pale, clutching a laptop bag like it contained nuclear launch codes. We didn't exchange pleasantries. I stepped aside. He walked in, and I pointed to the kitchen counter where the yellow envelope lay open like a dissected frog. We spent the next hour in a silence that was broken only by the clicking of keys and the rustling of paper. Liam, usually the calmest person I knew, was vibrating with a cold, terrifying anger. He went through the printout page by page, comparing it to his own source code and business plan on his screen. He didn't even change the font, Liam said, his voice tight. Rose, he didn't even reformat the graphs. He literally took screenshots of my work, put them into a new document, and slapped a new logo on top. Look at this. He turned his laptop toward me. On the left was his original slide. Projected user growth. Q3. On the right was Ethan's stolen version, Logitech growth strategy. But the most damning part wasn't the plagiarism, it was the omission. On page 4 of Liam's original deck, there was a section titled Strategic Partners, listing me as an angel investor and advisor. In Ethan's version, that page had been clumsily edited. My name was gone. In its place, under the heading Lead Consultant, was the name Ethan Hansen. He had erased me. He had taken the money I gave him, the debt I forgave him, the rent I paid for him, and now he had taken my professional identity, scrubbed it out, and pasted his own mediocrity over the empty space. It was not just theft. It was an attempt to rewrite reality where he was the genius and I never existed. He sent this to Titanium Ventures, I said, pointing to the email header. Do you know them? I know of them, Liam said, typing furiously. They are aggressive. They fund high-risk tech startups. If Ethan convinced them he has the code, which he doesn't, he only has the PDF, they might have already issued a term sheet. That is why he sent you this. He thinks he has the deal in the bag. He doesn't have the code, I repeated, the realization sharpening my focus. He has the sales pitch, but if they ask for a demo? He stalls, Liam said. Or he tries to hire a cheap freelancer to build a shell that looks like my work. That is what con men do. They sell the smoke and hope they can build the fire before anyone notices. We are not going to let him build the fire, I said. We are going to burn the smokehouse down. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved years ago but never hoped to use. It was for a corporate attorney named Mr. Vance, a shark of a lawyer who had handled a contract dispute for my firm the previous year. It was 8 o'clock at night, but lawyers like Vance didn't sleep. They billed. He answered on the second ring. I put him on speaker. I explained the situation in under 2 minutes. The stolen IP, the pitch deck, the familial blackmail, and the active solicitation of investors using stolen materials. Do you have proof of original creation? Vance asked, his voice gravelly and efficient. I have Git repository logs dating back 18 months, Liam answered. I have timestamps on every line of code. And Rose, do you have the blackmail note? I have the sticky note in his handwriting, I said. And the envelope? Good, Vance said. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. This is attempted grand larceny and fraud. But the legal system is slow, and venture capital moves fast. If he signs a deal this week, untangling the money will be a nightmare. We need to kill the deal tonight. How? I asked. I am going to draft a notice of intellectual property theft and pending litigation, Vance said. We won't just send it to your brother. We are going to send it to the compliance officer at Titanium Ventures, and we are going to copy every other firm on that email chain. VCs talk, Rose. Once they see a credible claim of stolen IP attached to a founder, he becomes radioactive. Nobody will touch him. Do it, I said. I will need a retainer, Vance warned. $5,000. I didn't blink. I will wire it in the morning. Send the emails now. We hung up. Liam looked at me. You are spending $5,000 to stop him? I am spending $5,000 to protect my investment, I said, and to make sure he never does this to anyone else. We sat there for another hour, waiting. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. I made coffee. Liam paced. Then, at 9:45, my phone dinged. It was an email from Vance. Sent. You are blind copied. I opened the attachment. It was brutal. It was a formal, terrifying legal document that laid out the theft in excruciating detail. It didn't use emotional language. It used words like misappropriation, fraudulent misrepresentation, and immediate injunctive relief. 10 minutes later, the first domino fell. Liam's phone buzzed. He checked an industry alert he had set up. Titanium Ventures just pulled a term sheet, he said, his eyes widening. It is on the gossip thread. They didn't name Ethan, but the timestamp matches. Due diligence failure on logistics seed round. That is him. Ethan's phone must have been exploding. I imagined him sitting in his apartment, watching his inbox fill with rejections, watching the yes men turn into ghosts. My phone rang. It wasn't Ethan. It was Mom. I stared at the screen. I felt a wave of exhaustion. It was so predictable. Ethan gets hurt. Ethan calls Mom. Mom attacks Rose. It was the Hanson family algorithm. I answered, "Hello, Mother." "What have you done?" Her voice was a low tremble, different from her usual screeching. It sounded like she was in shock. "Ethan just called me. He was crying. He said he lost everything. He said you ruined his life." "Ethan ruined his own life when he stole my friend's business and tried to sell it," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I just turned on the lights." "He was trying to make something of himself," she cried. "He had a deal. Rose, he told me he was going to get $500,000 in funding. He was finally going to be the success we knew he could be. And you jealous, petty girl, you called the investors and told lies about him." "I didn't tell lies," I said. "I sent them proof of theft. Did he tell you that he stole the idea? Did he tell you he blackmailed me?" "Ideas are free," she shouted, her logic twisting into impossible shapes to defend him. "He took an idea and he improved it. That is business. You are just mad because he was going to be bigger than you. You couldn't stand the thought of your brother winning, so you sabotaged him." "Mom," I said, cutting her off, "listen to me very carefully. This isn't a family squabble. This is a felony. He committed a crime. If I hadn't stopped him, he would have taken investor money. And when they found out he didn't have the product, he would have gone to prison. I didn't ruin him. I saved him from a federal indictment." "Don't you dare play the savior," she spat. "You are dead to us. I mean it this time. Do not call me. Do not come to Christmas. You have destroyed this family for the last time." "Okay," I said. "What?" "I said okay," I repeated. "If protecting myself from a thief means I am dead to you, then so be it. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. I blocked the number. It was the first time I had ever blocked her. It felt final. It felt like amputation. Painful, bloody, but necessary to stop the gangrene from spreading. "She didn't take it well?" Liam asked from the table. "She thinks I am the villain," I said, "but that is okay. I am done auditioning for the role of the hero." We thought it was over. We thought the legal letter and the investor withdrawal would be the end of it. We thought Ethan would retreat into his hole and lick his wounds. But we underestimated his desperation. The next morning, Liam arrived at my office. He looked like he hadn't slept. He had his tablet with him. "He is not stopping," Liam said, pulling me into a private conference room. "I have been monitoring the state business registry all night. Look at this." He slid the tablet over. It was a filing submitted at 3 a.m. A new limited liability company had been registered, Phoenix Solutions, LLC. "So he started a new company," I said. "So what?" "Look at the officer list," Liam said. I looked. The registered agent wasn't Ethan Hanson. It was Clara Reynolds, his wife's maiden name. And the business address wasn't in our state. It was a virtual mailbox in Nevada. "And look at the asset transfer," Liam continued, tapping the screen. "He is trying to transfer the Logitech IP to this new entity. He thinks if he puts it in Clara's name and hides it in a shell company in another state, the investors won't link it to him. He is going to try to pitch it again, probably to smaller, less diligent angels who won't check the blacklist." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just a thief. He was a relentless one. He was willing to drag his wife into a criminal conspiracy just to avoid getting a real job. "He is going to get caught eventually," Liam said. "But if he scams someone in the meantime and they find out the code is mine, I could get sued. They could claim I was part of it. My reputation could be trashed by association." "No," I said. "We are not waiting for him to get caught. We are going to catch him." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. I was done with letters. I was done with phone calls. I was done with defense. "Liam," I said, turning back to him, "where is the physical address for that registered agent in Nevada?" "It is a mail drop," Liam said. "But the notary stamp, see here? The notary who signed the LLC formation papers is local. It is a mobile notary service here in town." And the timestamp? 3 in the morning, Liam said, which means he paid extra for an after-hours signing. He is in a rush. If he is in a rush, he is desperate, I said. And if he is using Clara's name, he is vulnerable. I picked up my purse. Call Vance, I said. Tell him to draft a subpoena for that notary, and tell him to get a court order ready for the seizure of digital assets. Where are you going? Liam asked. I am going to make a settlement offer, I said cold. One he can't refuse. Rose, don't go alone, Liam warned. He is unstable. I am not going alone, I said. I am taking the one person Ethan is actually afraid of. I didn't mean a bodyguard. I didn't mean the police. I meant the only person in the world who could shame Ethan Hansen into submission. The only person whose opinion he valued more than money. I walked out of the office and drove to the one place I swore I would never go back to. I drove to the country club on the north side of town. I parked in the visitor lot and walked past the tennis courts to the clubhouse. Sitting at a table on the patio, reading a newspaper and drinking an iced tea, was my father. He looked up when I approached. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. When he saw me, he started to smile, then checked himself, his eyes darting around to see if Mom was nearby. Rose, he said softly, you shouldn't be here, your mother. I don't care about Mother, I said, sitting down opposite him. I am here for you. Dad, I am here to give you a choice. A choice? Ethan is about to go to prison, I said. Not the metaphorical prison of debt, real, federal prison. He is committing fraud in Clara's name. He is dragging your daughter-in-law into a felony. Dad's face went gray. What are you talking about? I have the evidence, I said. I am going to the authorities in 2 hours, unless you come with me and help me stop him. Me? Dad whispered. What can I do? You can stop being a coward, I said. You can come with me to his apartment, and you can be the one to tell him it is over. You can be the father you should have been 20 years ago. Dad looked at his hands. He looked at the golf course. He looked at the life of comfortable silence he had chosen. Then he looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see resignation. I saw resolve. Let's go, he said. I drove us to Ethan's apartment. It was a grim building on the east side, just as I had described to Mom. We walked up the stairs. I didn't knock. I pounded on the door. Ethan opened it. He looked haggard, his eyes wild, wearing the same clothes he had on yesterday. When he saw me, he snarled. Get away from me! I told you, you are dead to... Then he saw Dad standing behind me. Ethan froze. His mouth hung open. Dad, what are you doing here? Dad stepped past me. He walked into the messy, cramped living room. He looked at the laptop open on the coffee table, displaying the Phoenix Solutions logo. He looked at Clara, who was sitting on the sofa, weeping silently. Pack your bags, Clara, Dad said gently. You are going to your parents' house. You can't tell her what to do, Ethan shouted, finding his voice. This is my house. You are trespassing. Dad turned to Ethan. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his hand. He just looked at him with a profound, crushing disappointment that was heavier than any shout. It is over, son, Dad said. Rose showed me the papers, the theft, the fraud, the shell company. She is lying, Ethan screamed, pointing at me. She is trying to sabotage me. Stop it, Dad said. The command cracked like a whip. Just stop lying. For once in your life, stop. Ethan crumbled. He sank onto the arm of the sofa. I need this, he sobbed. I need it to work. I have nothing. You have your freedom, I said, stepping forward. But only if you sign this. I pulled the final document from my bag. It wasn't a promissory note. It was a confession of judgment and a permanent injunction. It stated that he admitted to the theft, that he would dissolve Phoenix Solutions immediately, and that he was permanently barred from ever contacting Liam, myself, or any of our investors again. It also stipulated that if he ever violated this agreement, the confession would be filed with the court, triggering immediate damages of $100,000. Sign it, I said. And the police don't get called. Clara doesn't get charged as an accomplice. You walk away. Ethan looked at Dad. He was looking for the bailout. He was looking for the checkbook. Sign it, Ethan, Dad said, or I will drive Rose to the police station myself. Ethan picked up the pen. His hand shook. He signed. I took the paper. I checked the signature. It is done, I said. I looked at Clara. Go home, Clara, before he takes you down with him. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door without a word. I looked at Dad. Thank you. He nodded. He looked at his son, who was weeping into his hands. I will stay with him for a bit, Dad said. Make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. Okay, I said. I walked out of the apartment. I walked down the stairs. I walked out into the sunlight. I took out my phone and texted Liam. Got it. It is over. I got into my car. I was exhausted. I was empty. But as I turned the key in the ignition, I realized that for the first time in my life, the rearview mirror was clear. There was no one chasing me. There was no one waiting to pull me back. I put the car in drive and headed toward the highway, toward the city, toward the future, and I didn't look back. The ink on the confession Ethan signed in his apartment was barely dry when he tried to light the match that would burn us all down. I should have expected it. A cornered animal does not bargain. It bites. 2 days after my father and I left him sobbing on his sofa, I received an urgent call from Mr. Vance, my attorney. Ethan had attempted to bypass the agreement we forced upon him by going scorched earth. He had sent a frantic, rambling email to the legal department of Horizon Strategy Group, my employer, and to every single verified investor in Liam's database. In it, he claimed that I had used my position as a consultant to steal his proprietary logistics software, that I had coerced him into signing a false confession under physical duress from our father, and that Phoenix Solutions was the rightful owner of the code. It was a suicide mission. He was trying to tank my career even if it meant destroying his own credibility in the process. I walked into the conference room at my office on Monday morning. The air was sterile, cooled to a precise 68 degrees. Liam was there, looking more annoyed than worried. Mr. Sterling, the managing partner of my firm, sat at the head of the table. He is persistent. I will give him that, Mr. Sterling said, sliding a printout of Ethan's email across the glass table. He claims you threatened him with a tire iron. It is quite the screenplay. I am sorry you had to see this, I said, feeling a familiar flicker of shame. I can resign if this is bringing too much heat to the firm. Mr. Sterling laughed. It was a dry, confident sound. Rose, I have been in this business for 30 years. I know the difference between a whistleblower and a desperate extortionist. We ran a background check on your brother's new LLC. It is a shell, and we have the Git logs from Liam showing the code authorship. We are not firing you. We are issuing a cease and desist order that will make his head spin. I looked at Liam. He gave me a small thumbs up. The investors didn't bite either, Liam said. Titanium Ventures actually forwarded his email to me with a note that said, "Does this guy ever stop? You are in the clear. Rose, the industry knows who the fraud is." The sabotage had failed. The wall I had built was made of concrete, not straw. But there was one final loose end to tie. I needed to formalize the separation. I needed to turn the temporary victory into a permanent judgment. Mr. Vance arranged the meeting. It was held 3 days later in a neutral location, a rented conference room in a legal building downtown. It was the final scene of our family drama, and the cast was all present. I sat on one side of the long mahogany table with Vance and Liam. On the other side sat Ethan, looking gaunt and shifty, flanked by a court-appointed public defender who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. My parents sat next to him. Mom was dressed in black, as if mourning a death. Her face pinched and hard. Dad sat silently, his hands folded on the table, looking at no one. And at the far end of the table, sitting alone, was Clara. "We are here to finalize the dissolution of Phoenix Solutions and to execute the permanent restraining order," Vance began, his voice booming in the quiet room. We also have the matter of the $34,000 in restitution. My client has no assets, the public defender mumbled. You can't get blood from a stone. We know, Vance said. That is why we are offering a deal. We will stay the civil judgment for the debt. We will not garnish his future wages. In exchange, he signs a full admission of guilt regarding the intellectual property theft, to be filed with the Patent Office, ensuring he can never claim this code again, and he agrees to a lifetime non-contact order for Rose Hansen and Liam Davis. I already signed the paper at the apartment, Ethan snapped, his voice cracking. Why are we doing this again? Because you claimed duress, I said, speaking for the first time. So we are doing it here, with lawyers, with witnesses, so you can never lie about it again. Ethan glared at me. You are enjoying this. I just want it to be over, I said. I want to ask you one thing. Ethan, the envelope. The yellow envelope you sent to my apartment with the stolen pitch deck and the blackmail note. Why did you send it? You had to know it would lead me right to you. Ethan looked confused. He furrowed his brow. What envelope? I didn't send you an envelope. I was trying to hide the pitch deck until the funding cleared. Don't lie, I said, pulling the sticky note from my file. It is your handwriting. Thanks for the market research. Your move. You wanted to taunt me. I wrote that note, Ethan admitted, staring at the yellow square of paper. I wrote it and stuck it on the folder on my desk. It was just for me. To make myself feel better. I never mailed it. I couldn't find the folder a few days later. I thought I misplaced it. I paused. The confusion on his face was genuine. He was a bad liar. And right now, he wasn't lying. If you didn't mail it? I asked. Who did? I did. The voice came from the end of the table. We all turned. Clara stood up. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. She wasn't the weeping woman from the apartment anymore. She was someone who had reached the end of her rope. Clara? Ethan whispered. You? I found the folder on your desk, Clara said, her voice steady. I saw what you were doing. I saw that you were stealing again, and I saw that note. It was so cruel. You were gloating about robbing your own sister. She looked at me. I knew if I just left him, he would drag me down with his debt. He used my name for the LLC without asking me. I was trapped. I knew the only person who could stop him was you, Rose, but I knew you wouldn't act unless you saw how bad it really was. So I put it all in an envelope, and I mailed it. The room was silent. The taunt hadn't been an act of arrogance from a villain. It had been a desperate signal flare from a hostage. You betrayed me? Ethan asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. You are my wife. I was your wife, Clara corrected him. Now I am just another person you owe money to. She looked at the public defender. I filed for divorce this morning, and I am testifying to the fraud. I am not going to prison for him. Ethan slumped in his chair. The last pillar of his support had just collapsed. He looked at Mom, waiting for her to jump in, to scream, to fix it. Mom opened her mouth. This is ridiculous. Clara, you are confused. We can fix this internally. Rose, tell your lawyer to stop. We are a family. Mrs. Hansen, Vance interrupted, his tone sharp as a razor. If you speak again to obstruct this proceeding, I will have you deposed as a co-conspirator in the fraud. Do you want to explain to the IRS why you claimed Ethan as a dependent while he was hiding assets? Mom snapped her mouth shut. Her eyes bulged. For the first time in my life, the fear of consequences outweighed her need to control the narrative. She sank back into her chair, silenced not by respect, but by the cold, hard reality of the law. Sign the papers, Ethan, I said. Ethan looked at the documents. He looked at Clara, who refused to meet his eyes. He looked at Mom, who was staring at the table. He looked at Dad. Dad? Ethan whined. Are you going to let them do this? My father slowly stood up. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at the man-child he had enabled for 32 years. I am not letting them do anything, Dad said. You did this. You built this cage, brick by brick. He turned to look at me. His eyes were watery. but he held my gaze. "Rose," he said. I braced myself. I expected him to ask for mercy. I expected him to ask me to soften the blow. "I want to go on the record," Dad said, looking at the court reporter in the corner. "I want it known that my daughter, Rose Hanson, is not the black sheep of this family." The room went still. "We called her that because she was different," Dad continued, his voice gaining strength. "But she wasn't different because she was bad. She was different because she was the only one of us who was honest. She was the only one who worked. She is not the black sheep. She is the only clean thing that ever came out of this house." He looked at Ethan. "We are the black sheep, son, all of us. We failed her." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall. It was the final release of 24 years of conditioning. The label that had haunted me, that had been used to diminish me, had been publicly stripped away by the very man who had watched it happen. Ethan didn't say a word. He picked up the pen. He signed the confession. He signed the restraining order. He signed the dissolution of the company. He pushed the papers across the table to Vance. "Are you happy?" Ethan whispered to me. "You won. You have your money. You have your reputation. You have everything." "I don't have a brother," I said quietly. "But I can live with that." I stood up. I signed my copies of the documents. The scratch of the pen against the paper was the sound of chains breaking. "Mr. Vance will handle the filing," I said to the room. "I trust I won't see any of you again." "Rose," Mom said. It was a whisper, weak and pathetic. "Rose, wait." I didn't wait. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at Ethan's ruined face. I didn't look at Clara's relief or Dad's sorrow. I turned around and walked toward the heavy oak door. Liam opened it for me. I stepped out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and turned around. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see them one last time. They were arguing. Mom was waving her hands. Ethan was head in his hands. They were a tableau of chaos, a painting of dysfunction that I was no longer trapped inside. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the view. The silence was absolute. I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with cool, recycled air, but it tasted like oxygen on a mountaintop. I checked my watch. It was 11 o'clock. I had a lunch meeting with Liam and a new client at 12. I had a Pilates class at 5. I had a life that belonged entirely, irrevocably, to me. I pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator began to descend, taking me down to the street, down to the world where I was no longer a daughter, no longer a sister, no longer a victim. I was just Rose. And for the first time in the history of the Hanson family, the story had a happy ending. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country, and let's share our thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.